would you basically put a stake in the ground and say like all the Martech tools or RevTech tools in the future will be built around a data warehouse, and all of them will connect? None of them will have databases, and they'll just be sort of like activation tools. And there's just going to be this single sort of source of truth. In 5 or 10 years, is that the tech stack that we'll be dealing with, or do you have a different prediction?
Look, I wouldn't say it's the future. I think it's now. I mean, lots of businesses already understand that the warehouse first approach or the composability approach to building technology stacks is the right way to do it. Because eventually, if you grow big enough, you're going to want control, and that means you need to activate that control through a warehouse. Having said that, there are tons of businesses out there where it does not make sense to own and maintain a warehouse. So do I think that tools are going to suddenly stop building databases and having the ability to work outside of a warehouse? Absolutely not, because there's lots of businesses that grow on platforms that are surprising. I mean, one of the things I've learned from consulting to so many businesses over the years is that you would come across very mysterious and random stacks, and then you hear the story about how they evolved, and it's like, well, some growth guy or gal in the first year bought this tool, and then the whole company kind of grew around it, and then before you know it, it became like the central part of their stack. And that's not anybody's fault. It's not necessarily even a bad thing. But I do believe it's going to keep happening, because like when you're building a company from the ground up, you're not necessarily considering the long run. You're just trying to stay alive. You're trying to find customers and make revenue and grow the business and keep people happy. And like your technology stack is like one of your last concerns when you're a 10-person team, with 100K in burn every month and 10K in the bank. So like I think that's always going to be the case. Like that's just going to keep happening. But I do think that teams crave to be sophisticated, and they crave to be operate at the highest levels, and operating at the highest levels now it's kind of connoted with operating a warehouse first approach. And so I think like that is the right approach for most teams. And then when you just consider like what are people trying to do with marketing and RevTech, it aligns very closely with a warehouse first approach or a composable approach, because a lot of people are trying to collect event data at the top of the funnel and merge that with customer data at the middle of the funnel, and then activate that at the bottom of the funnel. And some of the challenges of doing that with an all-in-one solution is you have a bunch of wires going in every single direction, and there's not a lot of structure, and you don't have data control, and I can list the litany of other problems with it. But at the end of the day, it's like this trade-off between control, flexibility, cost, and all these other things. And I just think like as you grow and scale, the best approach is a warehouse approach for most large enterprises. And I think a lot of businesses take on that trajectory earlier in their lifetime and later, and we could have a discussion about is that curve kind of getting shifted sooner into a company's lifetime or later, depending on the size and context. And I guess the last thing maybe to come back to, which I don't want to harp too much on AI, but like I do think that we're in this time frame where our concept of a best-in-class stack is not clear anymore, and it's going to be continually changing. If you go back to 2017, when I was starting my career, around then and the 2 years before when I was at Branch, it was like we kind of built what we considered to be a best-in-class mobile growth stack, and then I saw what was kind of the best B2B stack, and it consisted of Salesforce and HubSpot with a bunch of other connected tools. But I think increasingly now with a warehouse first approach, there is no right answer. There's just like, there's lots of variation. There's lots of ways to do things. There are principles or design schematics that I think will make it easier for you. But, a year and a half ago, Lenny asked me the question on his podcast, like, hey, well, tell us the golden stack. And like, I had an answer, but like, I don't really think there's a golden stack. I don't really think there's a one size fit all. I do believe though that people are usually pretty silly in their choices for tools, and they like repeat the same, they take something from early in their career and they apply it without context to a brand new situation, which is a problem. But I don't think there's a best-in-class stack.
Yeah, I feel like your perspective on composability is super interesting, Austin, because you were essentially at mParticle, a CDP, right around the time where composability, reverse ETL tools like Census and Hightouch were hitting the mainstream, or was that like a couple of years before that happened? Like, bring us back in-house with like mParticle, Michael Katz days where you guys were like thinking about package versus composable CDPs.
Yeah, I joined mParticle in 2017, and I think Hightouch and Census really didn't hit mainstream until 2020. And I remember distinctively though, when I was working with Postmates, they were doing effectively what we're doing today, but it was way harder and used really complex tools to do it. Postmates, for example, was streaming data from their CDP back into their warehouse, and then they had a DAG running to pull that data back into Braze and other places, and it was super messy. It was all done in code. We had a team of 5 data engineers, and so I think like the main thing I've seen come out of that reverse ETL revolution is that it's way easier now. It has never been easier to move data around your data stack than today, and I think that's only going to get easier with time. You still have to have at least one data engineer, but I think, again, if I think back to Postmates, it was like a team of 2 to 3 plus, and no visibility for marketing, and no WYSIWYG tools, and no auditing, and SQLs in lots of different places. And there's like so many problems that I think are solved by the reverse ETL category. But what's fascinating about it is, at the time, 2017, a CDP was defined by Segment and mParticle, and it was like a tool that collects data, federates audiences, and it's kind of it. I mean, you could argue that they also had the ability to like roll SDKs, but anybody who's worked with Segment or mParticle knows that that's like a little bit of a misnomer, because they have cloud SDKs and then they have client SDKs, and they're not the same. And so, like, technically speaking, lots of tools are CDPs now, because they have the ability to collect data, they have the ability to federate data, and they have the ability to create audiences. And audiences, I would largely say, are like kind of table stakes for most tools now. Like, you can just create a list of users in almost anything and either export it or send it somewhere. So my biggest reflection on that time is just like the category of a CDP was so innovative, but it was fascinating how quickly it became monopolized by like every other category. And at the same time that was happening, lots of people were doing this without necessarily entering the CDP market, because there was a period of time in like, I think, late 2019 where like it was very confusing what a CDP was. Yeah. Nobody really knew. Companies that I would classically call like marketing automation or marketing capability tools were calling themselves CDP, because it was a wild, wild west. There was no definition. It was lots of things. It was none of these things. Now, the way that I like to describe it to people is like a CDP isn't a category of tool anymore. It's a collection of capabilities. And you can have those collection of capabilities spread across the entire stack. You can have them in one tool. Braze can help you collect data and federate audiences and import data to your warehouse. So it could be a CDP. You could collect data in a traditional way with a tool like mParticle or Segment, and then you could federate audiences with a tool like Census or Hightouch. Or you could use a tool like Census or Hightouch as both your data federation layer and your CDP. So I think there's like lots of possibilities there. I certainly didn't predict it in 2017, that's for sure.